Hey, John.
Hi everybody, and welcome to our bi-weekly fishing seminar here at Lake of the Ozarks. I'm John Niparadney, one of the co-hosts for this event, and what I've done for like 25 years or so is cover bass tournaments for BASS and Central Pro-Am, and have written for various national magazines. And during that time I've collected a whole bunch of tips which we have put into a 101 bass fishing tips book. It's got tips from all the top pros, Kevin Van Dam, Edwin Evers, and a lot of other guys. It basically covers everything from selecting rods and reels for different bass techniques to different structure to fish and different seasons and all. And this book is $15 on my website, jnoutdoors.com, and here at the seminar you get a break, it's $10 here. So have that book, and then I have another book, The Lake of the Ozarks Fishing Guide, which is sold out, but Bass and Bob,
I've got about 25 of them. They're on the website for 10 bucks.
Yeah,
it's an awesome book.
Too. And so what we did was I used to do these seminars at St. Louis County Parks. They discontinued it. Thought, you know, this would be a good idea for the local guys down here, so we started one up. Got a hold of Bass and Bob, and he supplies the sources for our seminars, and I'll let Bass and Bob talk about his ventures going on right now.
Cool. Thank you, John. And John's awesome. I mean, I know I've said this many, many times, but can't underestimate or undervalue what John Niparadney has done over many, many years, covering fishing with BASS, with bass all over the country, writing for Bass Magazine, writes for Bass Resource. He's a very sought out writer, journalism degree from University of Missouri. God, he's written, yeah. I mean, he's written 2 books.
Yeah.
I mean, he's the real deal. And I appreciate you, John, and partnering with you very much. And we do have his bass, what's it called again? Bass.
This one?
Fishing magazine on Lake of the Ozarks.
The Lake of the Ozarks Fishing Guide.
The Lake of the Ozarks Fishing Guide. It's an awesome book. I have an autographed copy still I keep on my coffee table. And it's from a lot of the greats, not just like some of the recent greats like Terry Blankenship and others, but Guido Hibdon and many, Denny Brower, many of the others. The information is still applicable. And John sold out of them. So maybe I'll start selling for like $100 a book.
Some guy on eBay has one for $500.
No kidding.
That's like good luck trying to sell it.
Yeah, well, so anyway, so I have those. I have about 25 available, and I think we sell them on the website for 10 or 15 bucks. But it's an awesome book. I still refer to it. So hey, everybody, hey, thank you for coming tonight. Really appreciate it. We got a great crowd here tonight. I think there's still parking cars out there. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I think we can handle about 15 or 20 more here. But anyway, for us, it's all about all you Bass and Bob members watching this video, which we greatly appreciate. We always try and have, you know, the very best fishermen on the lake. Tonight we have the great Lawson Hibdon, which I'll introduce to you here shortly. I do want to make a couple of announcements. So, if you're interested in fishing the Bass and Bob Summer Sizzler, which is Saturday, August 13th, 2-day tournament, August 13th and Sunday, August 14th. This year we're going out of Red Oak. Entry fee is $250. We always serve a nice breakfast, barbecue, you know, at the weigh-ins and all that kind of stuff. This year that's out of Red Oak. Yeah, I pay out really good. I'm not in the tournament business, so I'm just trying to take care of the anglers. So we pay out really good. Also, if you're interested in the Missouri Invitational, you know, we're getting our lineup of pros right now. We made a little bit of a cut last year in terms of the pros. I got 6 openings for pros right now. We're chasing down some of the best pros in the country, and that is on November 15th and 18th. Registration, the fee for that is $1,200. It's a 3-day event. Fishing 1 day, golfing 1 day, which we convert golfing into pounds, and then fishing the 3rd day. And last year we had a overall pot, a payout pot of about $85,000. So it's a really fun event. Check it out. It's on the website right now. If you fished it last year as a co-angler, you can register right now by August the 15th. If you don't register by August the 15th, we have a waiting list already of co-anglers that want to participate. So you'll get an email here in the next couple of days. If you're interested in participating and you participated last year, get on it right away, sign up, register, pay for it, and you're in. We have a great seminar series coming up. So like John mentioned, we're doing these every other Monday now, as the information got a little bit redundant, doing them every Monday. So next week we have Jim Dill, after that we have Denise Dill, after that we have Dion Hibdon, after that we have the great Dennis Beerhorse, and then we're gonna do once a month, every other Monday, once a month, doing them indoor versus outdoor, because chance of snow, cold, all that kind of stuff. So October, November, December, you can check out the website. We've got Marcus Sikora, Bill Davenport, Roger Fitzpatrick, and then we'll decide kind of where we go from there, going into January, February, March. So check it all out. We appreciate your participation. We appreciate your viewership. We're very fortunate tonight to have one of the greats, one of the legends. The family is legend, the Hibdon family. Everybody knows of Guido Hibdon, Dion Hibdon, and Lawson Hibdon has made a name for himself also. They all wear beards, and so that's pretty cool. They have their own website. What's the name of that website?
Hibdon Hooked.
Hibdon Hooked website, and they do videos and fishing reports and all that kind of stuff all the time. But this is not just about Lake of the Ozarks. We'll talk about tonight about Lake of the Ozarks, but these guys fish and compete well and are successful all over the country. So we're very fortunate to have Lawson Hibdon. Lawson, thank you very much.
Thanks for the introduction. I don't know that I was worth it, but
And your primary sponsor is Boatworks now?
Boatworks.
Okay.
Yeah, Boatworks, 10 Cup whiskey still.
Okay.
But
And we'll talk.
Boatworks has been great to us. So.
Okay. We'll
And
talk.
came in second on the Missouri Invitational last year.
Okay.
Thanks for reminding
Yeah,
me of
second,
that.
yeah, second on the Missouri, and his dad was third.
His dad was third.
So a little bit of bragging rights there from the Missouri Invitational last year. And how well do you golf?
Not very good.
But you still finished second.
Yeah.
And how good does your dad golf?
Maybe a little better than me. He practices once in a while.
Does he really?
Yeah, I
He
do
was
not.
sinking putts and we're taking his shots last year. He did real well.
And
Not mine.
finished third.
Third.
No, anyway, appreciate you, Lawson.
Absolutely.
Tell us a
Thanks
little
for
bit about what's.
inviting me.
Oh, man, we love having you, dude. Tell us a little bit about what's going on Lake of the Ozarks right now, and what you anticipate over the next several weeks and maybe even into August. They shut down the current, so that kind of has everybody a little bit
Yeah.
like, what's going on?
Well, like Bob said, that when that current shuts down, the fishing goes from being really good, all of May and June, even first part of July, was still really good, and then all of a sudden that current just stops. And that really throws a monkey wrench into it, because the fish get so in tune with, feeding every day at a certain time, and when that current's pulling, it's all day long. Now it gets even worse, they will feed almost on a schedule, because they'll still turn the current on. And, I watch it pretty close. I normally look at it once a day. And normally it's at night when it's been through the cycle all day, I'll look at it and try and find out what it's doing. But for the last week or so, about 3 o'clock every day, they kick the generation back on. And they do it till about 11 o'clock at night. Well, a lot of people might not see that significant, but to a fish that's standing down there in that current, that is pretty significant, that they turn that current on, because they're just like, oh, it's coming back on, we're going to get out there and feed. Well, they are, in the evenings.
What level of current do you feel like is gonna perhaps position them back on those points?
Well,
15,000, 20,000?
I mean, anything helps, but you know, when it goes from pulling, like, it pulled 37,000 cubic feet for like 2 months straight, you know, and now they dropped it down to like 2,000. Well, 2,000's nothing,
Right.
you know, that's not moving. So that's, you know, really not significant at all. You know, they don't really want to be out there standing in it. But if they kick it back up to 20,000 or so, which they have been, it made it all the way up to like 30,000 on Friday, I think. When they do that, that is a big deal to the fish, you know, and it's everything. It's a big deal to the shad, the catfish, the bass, everything kind of get on a schedule. And the later it gets into the summer now, you know, there's a thermocline developing, which, you know, I don't even want to get into that because I don't understand it any better than anybody else sitting there. But I do know somewhat, you know, what it does to them, and it'll be a certain depth, and you can see it on your depth finders now. I mean, the depth finders are so good now, you can actually see the thermocline.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be below it. I do know that, because I mean, if you're fishing, you know, if that thermocline's 22 foot, you know, 22 to 25 foot seems to be kind of where it normally is.
Dude, I can tell you, I was out there today, and maybe this was thermocline. I probably didn't even think of it in that way, but I'm over like 30 feet or 25 feet of water, and these fish are suspended up, they're suspended off the bottom in like 20 to 22 feet, and it's like, how do I catch those fish?
You don't very well.
Because they're above because they're above the thermocline.
Yeah, and it gets tricky. When it gets to be, you know, where you're really worried about the thermocline, I don't even like being out there. But when we do have to go and try and figure them out, I tend to go shallower, you know, and there are, you know, it seems weird being the heat of the summer.
That makes sense.
Fish go shallower. The hotter it gets, a lot of them go really shallow. Like the Ozarks is great because it's full of great big boat docks that they can stand under with all the shade, you know, and that's a good thing, you know, for us. We like to fish those boat docks, and you know, they haven't really been using them for the last month or so. There's always fish around them, but for the most part, they've been out there on them points. They've been, you know, anywhere from 15 to 30 foot deep.
Right.
There was a lot more of them this year that were deep than, you know, 15 foot. You know, most of them were out there in that 20 plus.
Right.
But, you know, as that thermocline gets worse and that oxygen, you know, pushes down,
Right.
a lot of the fish tend to go shallow. They start eating a lot more bluegill. I prefer them when they're eating bluegill because I like to catch them on a jig.
Right.
You know, when they're out there chasing shad around, which post spawn, that's the primary forage is, you know, they're eating big shad. They still eat other stuff, but that's what they focus on because it's so abundant out there where they're at. But when they start moving up, you know, and it happens every year about the same time, you know, middle of July, 1st of August, they always start getting on them shallower boat docks, and that makes them a lot easier for us to target, you know, because we like to fish around those docks, skip a jig under them. You know, we still throw a shaky head and stuff around them.
Is it usually under the docks or behind the docks, or is it just shade related?
90% of it's just shade.
And how deep? How deep a dock? It doesn't matter.
That varies. I mean, I don't know that they actually get on a specific dock pattern, you know, where September and October, they'll get on a certain kind of dock.
Right.
You know, and late summer, I don't think they really do because we catch them off of main lake deeper docks, you know, and we catch them off of docks that are in the very back of a creek.
Right.
You know, as long as they've got quite a bit of shade around them. And we just look for big platforms, you know, like big swim platforms, you know, anything that you think is going to put a deep shadow under that dock, there's going to be a bass standing around it. Normally 2 or 3 bass standing around it. But
And doesn't matter the back of the dock, meaning like the walkway or fish at all.
That's the only thing that summertime does take a little more time because you don't really know where he's going to be on it. Typically, I just look for the deepest, darkest shade,
Got it.
you know, and that'll depend on the time of day. You know, if it's in the morning, there's a lot of times where the front of that dock will be a little shadier, or, you know, the deeper
Right.
part of it out
Right.
there. And in the afternoon, once that sun gets below the trees, then kind of back towards the back and under the walkway and stuff will get a little shadier. But you kind of just got to fish the whole thing. But try and focus on the darkest shade around it is the best.
Right.
But, you know, that's kind of still insignificant right now because the fish are more in a transition right now.
Yeah.
And that's hard to explain because on Lake of the Ozarks, there are so many brush piles.
Right.
I mean, they're everywhere. You can't drag anything on the bottom for more than about 5 minutes without coming to a piece of brush.
Right.
Well, they're going from being out there on the points and little rough spots way out on the points offshore, and they're heading towards brush piles. Well, a brush pile is pretty easy to figure out. If it's shallower than the thermocline, there's probably one in it, you
Right.
know. But they're not quite there yet. The last week or so, they're kind of in a funk, and it's hard to explain, but they're in between.
Right.
We went from catching them really good, you know, early June on like a crankbait and stuff, to now you're dragging a worm and stuff around a lot more. And there's actually a little time where you start catching them on a deep crankbait again pretty good because they are in between and you can't really focus on anything. You just kind of got to fish around where they're at.
Yeah.
But they're heading towards brush piles. There's going to be a lot of fish and brush. Marcus is going to start winning everything. You know, it happens every year. He works at it a lot harder than we do. But they just head towards brush piles, and we make that pretty simple. You know, we throw a big worm and a big jig in a brush pile in the summertime.
What kind of depth?
Well, that depends on the thermocline a lot
Right,
of
good
times.
point. Yeah, yeah.
You know, if they're in that general 20-foot area, you know, we'll focus on that brush that's 18 to 22 feet.
Right.
But if they seem to be a little shallower, which that depends on temperature and all sorts of things, but you kind of got to figure out what depth range they're at and then take off looking for brush in that depth range.
Mm-hmm.
Which, once again, the brush is so abundant that it's pretty easy to figure out a pattern, you
Right.
know, or run a pattern like
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Lawson, I saw the fish, you know, with the forward-facing sonar, I saw the fish, and they were all suspended. It looks like, you know, none of them were on the bottom, none of them were up in the top, and it was hell to try to catch them. I mean, you throw almost anything at them, and it just they wouldn't bite.
I've fished pretty well every day for the last week or so, and it's not a lot of fun right now. I know that. You still catch some, and you still catch some big ones because they're still in some of the right areas to catch big ones, you know, out there on the deep places. But that comes back to the current moving, and when it stops, that's when you see them pull up off the bottom and suspend. And I've sat through a million of these seminars, you know, with my dad, listening to all the really great guys. If a fish is, you know, really keyed in on current and it shuts off, it's just really hard to catch them, you know, because they're on such a schedule to where they feed, you know, at this time. And on a place like Lake of the Ozarks where there's so many fish, there's always some feeding, you know, because they're not all feeding at once because
Right.
there's so many. But when I start seeing that, you know, when the current stops, and if I am looking for them on my graph, I just go until I find some that are on the bottom or close to it, you know, because those are the fish that are going to be still active and feeding.
Awesome. When they turn the current on, like you said, they do it kind of sporadically. Not
Yeah.
every day, but some days.
Yep.
So you got to kind of look at that. Do they immediately go? Do they immediately either come in from the main lake or get on a ledge on a secondary point or something like that? Or does it take an hour or so for them to actually feel that current and actually get on those?
You know, I don't know how long it actually takes, because that comes along with there just being so many fish. You know, there's always some biting somewhere, so that's what we're always hunting down.
Got it.
But
Yeah.
there's a lot of those places you come to right now where, you know, there'll be a real sharp break. You know, if you're fishing like a bluff end or something, there'll be a real sharp break. You know, you might be fishing a kind of a tabletop that's, you know, 15, 18 foot, and there'll be a break that breaks off into nothing, you know,
Right.
50 foot.
Right.
And you'll see a school of fish kind of standing off of that break.
Got it.
Those fish, they're standing there waiting. You know, they're waiting on that current to move, or a school of shad to swim up there over the top of that feeding area. If you see those fish standing out there off the edge of that, there is not a harder fish to catch, because those aren't feeding.
Right.
And yes, I mean, you can, like you said, you can throw everything at them,
Right.
and you're just not going to catch many.
Are you catching any on the dock cables?
Yeah, yeah. When they do suspend, that's a great point. When fish start to suspend, a lot of our docks, you know, like the Ozarks, they've got cable braces that go to the bottom. Got a big piece of concrete at the bottom that anchors it. That's a great option for that fish to stand around when they're suspended, not really feeding. But if you throw your jig out there over that cable, or, you know, we catch a lot of fish, you know, on like a 5-inch swim bait, and, you know, all kinds of stuff. But when they're suspended around a cable, those are a lot of times still catchable, because they're standing on something. You know, if they're on or around something like that, there's a lot of times you can trick him into biting. If you hop your jig over that cable, or a worm, or a swim bait, or whatever, a lot of times won't react and bite it, you know, around a cable. You know, that's something that not a lot of people pay a lot of attention to, because
That's something your dad taught me.
yeah, Dad's good at it. He
Yeah.
looks at all of them.
Yeah.
But, and I mean, we fish a ton of cable braces, you know, that come off of marina docks, and a lot of our main lake docks, because the boat traffic's so bad, you know, that's an extra brace to hold it down so it's not beating up and down in the waves.
Do you find that any, you know, I'm thinking of some specific places where I've caught them off of the cable, the dead man, you know, the concrete that's holding them, or off the cable itself. Do you find that any depth is too deep, you know, and maybe that's thermocline related, or?
Yeah, this time of year, there's a lot of them that are too deep.
Yeah.
Because I don't think they want to be down there, you know, it all
Right.
comes to thermocline, but they don't want to be down there, you know, 40 foot,
Right.
which is around the fronts of those condo docks and marina docks is where a lot of them are. And there's a lot of those that, you know, they'll run out off the bank 100 yards or so, and that's, most of them are getting too deep.
Right.
You know, when you come to early fall, you know, when the thermocline starts to kind of go away,
Right.
then your options are kind of open to any of it, because there will be fish that go 30, 40. I've
Right.
caught them 50 foot off of those cable braces. But right now, there's a lot less of them. A lot more of them will suspend up on the cables versus
Right.
down on the concrete part of it.
And how will you work a cable? Do you work it kind of similar to a brush pile? Let's say you can see it on your side scan, or your down imaging, or your forward facing sonar. How do you work it? Do you start with the shallowest and then work it over the cable, and then kind of work the different depths?
Yeah, that kind of depends on what way it's coming off the dock. You know, if there's shade involved, I always throw around the shade line.
Right.
If there's, you know, half of that cable that's going to be shaded by the, you know, the shady side of a dock,
Right.
you know, I'm going to probably make a cast down that shade line and kind of let my jig or whatever fall down the cable. But there's so many cables that, you know, they kind of crisscross and all kinds of stuff. So there's no real science to that.
Got it.
I mean, if you see fish around them, try and get your bait close to them.
Got it.
There's no one way to fish a dock cable, really.
Right.
Lawson, they say that, you know, there's some fish that are deep related, and then there's fish that don't ever get deep, they're in shallow, okay? Forward-facing sonar, you can see those the fish, you know, in the deep water. Is it time now to go to back in the shallows, back in some of the creeks and everything, and start flipping docks or whatever? Because you're gonna be hard enough on those points and the secondary points, is it time to do that now?
Well, we tend to, and
It's like yes, yes, and yes.
yeah, that's a hard one. But yeah, we tend to go shallower, you know, as the summer goes on, just because all that stuff out there, main lake, secondary points, everything has just been pounded so hard for the last month and a half.
Yeah.
You know, really 2 months now, but it's just been pounded on. There's, you know, a 3.5 hour derby, I think 5 days a week now. You know,
Yeah.
between the whole lake, there's one every night of the week.
Exactly.
And then you get to the weekend and there's normally 1 or 2 more.
Yeah.
So all of that stuff out there has just been beat on.
Yeah.
Now you can still go out there and you can still catch the biggest stringer of fish of your life out there right now. But a lot more of it comes down to timing now, you know, when that current moves. So we tend to kind of venture away from that, take some of the odds, you know, and stack them in our favor. You are correct. Some fish never go deep all year. You know, there's probably, I mean, I would hate to imagine the population that lives shallow, but it's probably something like half, I would say, because you can go shallow year round and catch a nice stringer of fish.
And how do you
And
define,
where would you go?
how do you define shallow?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Steve.
Well, I mean, are you looking at, you know, channel swings, you know, that's the first area that you would look at and then go back in those, you know, coves or
Shallow flats,
you know,
yeah.
flats, or, I mean, what are you looking at when you go shallow?
This time of year, they start eating a lot more bluegill when they are shallow, because the bluegill are up there spawning.
Right.
They spawn every full moon through the summer, and if you're looking around those bluegill beds and you find them in the backs of everything, every little pocket, you know, will have one little patch of bluegill beds. Most of them are about the size of this table, and they're just little round, light or dark spots. There's bluegill around them. You can catch them in the heat of the summer on a little tiny topwater around those bluegill beds. We've done it forever. It still happens to this day. You can
Like
go
a
do
pop
it.
R or something?
Pop R. We throw a little tiny prop bait a lot, like a Brian's Bee. There's all kinds of them.
Right.
But you can catch a nice stringer of fish on a little tiny topwater right now, and it doesn't really make sense, you know, 100-degree days.
Right.
And it can be 100 degrees out and the sun just beating down, and you can catch a 5 or 6 pounder standing around in bluegill beds on topwater.
Right.
That's just how it happens. And they just, when they get
Does that have to be in the
focused,
shade?
huh?
Does that have to be in the shade, or can
No.
that be in the sun?
No, it doesn't have to be in the shade. Shade does help. There'll be a lot of times where the bluegill beds will be, you know, right in the center of a little pocket, and there might be a tree that shades down half of that pocket, and that big one might stand in the shade just off to the side of the bluegill beds. We do notice that a lot. You'll very seldom see a big one swimming through those bluegill beds. You see a lot of 2 and 3 pounders swimming through them, but a big one a lot of times I think just swims up there and eats one when he needs to eat.
Right.
So they're a lot of times just kind of lurking around. If there's a good boat dock there, he's probably living underneath that boat dock. Pretty easy to focus on. You know, normally you can just pull in there, and if you see bluegill beds, just fish around right there. When they get to eating those bluegill, this is actually one of my favorite times to fish, just because we do like to throw a jig so much. Well, nothing imitates a bluegill better than a jig, really. I mean, that's what a jig is for 90% of the time.
I thought it was like a crawfish.
It's a crawfish very few times through the year.
Yeah.
I mean,
No
that's, yeah. Normally on Lake the Ozarks, it is a bluegill, and that's just always been the way it is. You know, my grandpa talked about it forever and ever and beat it into my brain that, yeah, they just don't eat, they eat crawdads all the time.
Right.
But they make a living eating bluegill and shad and stuff.
Right.
What color
Why
jig do
wouldn't
you
you
have to
throw,
use?
why wouldn't you throw a bluegill swim bait?
You
It
can.
looks like a bluegill swim bait.
You
know?
can, and we catch some on a bluegill looking swim bait, not near as many as a jig though.
Okay.
And it doesn't make a lot of sense, and it does because we throw a jig a lot. But
What color jig would you have to use to imitate the bluegill? What color?
any green pumpkin, you know,
Green pumpkin.
anything green pumpkin with a little bit of chartreuse on it. You know, normally we throw a straight green pumpkin, just dip the tails in a little bit of chartreuse.
You have a trailer?
Yeah. Yep, anything. I mean, we throw all kinds of trailers. You know, that deal you guys are making now, it's pretty special, which is just a replacement for a piece of pork. And that's something we don't talk about a lot, but we still throw pork a lot. The deal they're making is going to make our lives a lot easier because you don't have to leave the pork hanging over the side of the boat anymore.
Dirt jig style size, like a dirt jig size jig.
This time of year, it's normally bigger. A dirt jig,
Even around bluegill bag?
yes. You know, them bluegill, a lot of times, the ones that they're eating are 4 and 5 inches long, you know, so we're throwing like a 3/8 and a half ounce, and it's normally something we can skip, so it's like an Arky style, you know, something with flat bottom.
Right.
But our trailers tend to be a little bigger this time of year just because they're eating bigger bluegill.
So like a brush hog or?
You can, a brush hog doesn't skip very good, that's the
No.
only reason we don't throw it.
Yeah.
But any beaver, you know, flat,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know, and we still throw a zoom, you know, chunk a lot,
Right.
just because it skips good.
Yeah.
Came up with it.
And that's definitely my favorite way to go and try and catch them. You know, I'm not a brush pile beater. I'm just not that good at it. Don't put out
You're
enough
probably like
brush.
me, you try it all.
Right. But, you know, if I can go and skip a jig under a boat dock and catch a nice stringer, that's what I'm gonna go do.
Will the bluegill spawn underneath the boat dock as well? Or
Not-
or is it just because dock will hold a lot of bluegill?
Well, you'll start seeing them bluegill kind of floating up around the foam on those docks. And those aren't spawning, most of
Right.
those are done spawning.
Right.
But they just kind of hang around those docks, and I have noticed that a lot in the last week. Since they quit pulling all that current, you start seeing them bluegill floating a lot. A lot of people don't like that, and I have no idea why, because all that means is there's bass hanging around up there getting ready to eat them. And if you see them floating right up under dock foam, that's my favorite thing in the world to go and fish around, is them big bluegill standing around dock foam. Because when you skip your jig under there, if you hit that dock foam and the bluegill scatter, you get bit about half the time when that happens.
Wow.
And that's just something that we have always looked for, is them bluegill standing around docks.
Is there a depth, when you talk about those kind of docks and that kind of foam, or, you know, those floats, is there a specific depth that you're looking for? Not that you're looking for, but obviously there's a lot of docks that are on like
Right.
main lake over the top of, you know,
Well,
50 feet of water.
Yeah, and that's not normally where they're gonna be hanging around. Typically, it's something around a little tiny pocket. Those bluegill spawn in little tiny dips in the bank. You know, a lot of times it's, you know, not even a boat length deep, you know, and there'll be a little pod of bluegills standing around, you know, spawning there. And that doesn't matter if that's on the main lake or all the way in the back of a creek.
Right, got it.
They spawn everywhere because there's so many of them.
Right.
So if there's a boat dock, you know, right there, and normally on a little tiny pocket, there'll be a boat dock on each side of it, or one right in the middle of it. I don't really like that because I think that hinders the bluegill spawning a little bit. If you come to one of those little pockets and it's got a dock on both of the little tiny
Shoulders,
points going
right,
into
yeah.
it, those are perfect.
Yeah.
You know, because those bluegill can pull in there, spawn, pull out there, and stand around those two boat docks.
So you're gonna be able to see those beds on there, so that you're only in 2-3 foot of water? Or
Yeah, I mean, they spawn just like the bass, you know, anywhere from a foot to 3, 4, 5 foot deep. But they're standing around every one of those little pockets.
Look like a moon surface.
Yeah, they're standing all over it. They look like little tiny craters everywhere.
Right.
And the ones that are 5 and 6 foot deep, you can see those on your graph. You know, you can idle around and see those little bluegill beds on your graph because they'll be in a little tight group, but they'll be little dig out deals, little bowls, you know, and it's only about that big, but there'll be 50 of them right there together. And they're pretty easy to find normally. I mean, I've been testing the waters on that a little bit this week, and there are some big ones getting around them. So it's starting to happen.
You find them on mud bottom more than sand? Pea gravel.
It's a lot more gravel. You know, you see some standing around rocky stuff, but most of it, it's, you know, pea gravel. I don't really care for sand or silt. You know, I think they like that gravel a lot more. But you will pull into one of those every now and then that's like a silty bottom, and you'll see those little dark colored bowls. Well, it's the same thing. They're still bluegill beds. It just looks different because it's dark. But yeah, they're standing everywhere right now.
You know, are those bass like on the shoulders of those little pockets and stuff like that, that you're catching them around the floats? Are they just sitting in there kind of in the shade waiting to ambush a bluegill, and so you're flipping to them versus you're not maybe necessarily flipping directly to a bluegill set of beds, you're fishing
Right.
to their ambush.
Yeah, you're just trying to fish around where the bass are supposed to be. You know, they're standing around the shady parts of them docks. They don't ever, once they get to those places, normally they don't have to move.
Right.
Because there's so many bluegill coming to them.
Right.
You know, because the bluegill spawn every full moon in the summer, you know, and it doesn't matter if the water temperature was 90 degrees or 100 degrees, them bluegill are still up there trying to spawn.
Right.
So there's always just an abundance of them bluegill coming to those shallower docks. Because that's an easy place for a bluegill to pull out there and stand too when they get done spawning.
Right.
It's no different than a post-spawn bass going out there deep. A bluegill does the same thing, but he doesn't swim near as far normally.
Right.
It's a really neat time of the year to fish.
It's an interesting time.
It is.
It's a big freaking puzzle right now.
Very interesting, and it's a lot of times hard to figure out. But when you figure it out, you will catch some big stringers of fish a lot of times.
Right.
Do
You know.
swim the jig or do you keep it in contact with the bottom?
We do a little bit. You know, if those bluegill, if it seems like you pitch your jig in there and he eats it on the way to the bottom, you know, for 2 or 3 docks in a row, a lot of times we'll kind of hop it around and swim it around the foam a little bit more. If you pitch it in there and have to work it out, you know, you're going to have to pitch it in there and work it out. But there's a lot of times you'll skip it in there and he'll have it eaten before you ever get your reel engaged.
Right.
And I know that's happened to everybody sitting here. You know, it happens a lot quicker when they're eating bluegill and stuff that can run away from them. Where on a crawdad, you pitch it out there and he's working it along the bottom and he's picking it down the rock. So, you know, that's a lot slower.
Yeah. I know you brought some baits with you, Lawson. Go ahead and talk about some of your baits.
Well, I just brought some of the stuff that's, you know, kind of happening right now. I didn't bring like the dock we would skip around a jig or around a dock, but I brought some of the deeper stuff that's happening right now. We actually just designed a jig for Baitworks' tackle store.
Really?
And it's kind of weird, but you know, these fish on Lake the Ozarks, they eat a football jig. You can pretty well catch one on a football jig, you know, 12 months out of the year.
Yeah.
And a football jig is really awesome when it's working, but when it comes down to them fish being locked into a pile of brush or something like that, you're still throwing that football jig in there and you're still catching them on it, but it's a lot harder to work around,
Right.
you know, and it's hard to lay it down because you catch so many on a football jig. But we came up with one that actually works through the brush a lot better and has the same effect as a football jig. You know, a football jig actually pushes a lot of silt and stuff on the bottom. And if you've ever watched like a underwater camera, you know, of a bass feeding or picking something off the bottom, they're the crawdads and the bluegill, you know, if he's down there digging around in the rocks when that bass getting ready to hit him, he's moving a lot of silt and sand and gravel. And that's what a football jig does for you. You know, it's down there, it's a lot like a Carolina rig. Carolina rig catches a lot of fish because it's down there moving gravel and silt off the bottom, and it makes it easy for that fish to find it. Well, we done the same thing, you know, we just took I don't even know what we're gonna call it yet. It's kind of an in-between a football jig, a pointy structure type jig, but we come up with one that works through everything pretty good, you know, versus you throw a football jig out there in a pile of brush and you're hung immediately.
Right, yeah.
You know, we don't like that. But, you know, a football style jig this time of year is pretty hard to beat. You know, you see it.
Let me take a look at that right quick.
You see it week after week when.
This is one that you guys are designing right now?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not on the market yet?
Probably this week it will be.
And you can get that from Baitworks?
Yeah, I think they're doing it like an online special deal.
And you don't know what it's gonna be called yet?
I don't.
Probably be branded around the Hibdon somehow or another.
Yeah, it will be.
Cool. And you like this peanut butter and jelly color?
Yeah, that's pretty hard to beat this time of year. I mean, it imitates a bluegill really well.
Yeah.
You know, that's still a crawdad if he's down there picking a crawdad off the bottom. You know, peanut butter and jelly is just a good deep water color
Right.
for some reason. Always has been.
Why is this jig better than a football jig or whatever? Is it standing up? Is it, you know, better, you know, able not to get hung? I mean,
Well, that's our idea behind it, is we were trying to make a football jig that would work through stuff better.
Right.
You know, because a football jig, when you're throwing around brush, which, I mean, I know everybody's been hung up with football jig and pile of brush, it's just annoying and it's
It's
happening all the time. Yeah, there you go. But I get
it's
tired
almost
of
a
it.
shaky head, you know, it's almost a
Right.
stand up shaky head.
Yeah, and
Yeah, it's got that flat head.
Yeah.
That's nice.
It does stand up. You know, we looked at them in tanks. We wasted a lot of money building molds. That's the one that we came up with. So
Looks awesome.
It works good, and it stabs them really good.
What is that trailer you have on that one right there?
That's a Zoom.
Sugar craw? Or
No,
is that
it's like the super speed crawl.
Okay,
The biggest speed crawl.
got it.
To say that really matters, anything big and flapping,
Got it.
you know, is going to be
Okay.
more of a bluegill imitation.
Cool.
But, and that's probably our number one, you know, when it comes to summertime fishing, is a big jig.
Right.
Just catch a ton of fish on it, you know. I know you fished with Roger Fitzpatrick here a couple of weeks ago, and
That's what he did. I
Roger
mean, he
knows the
hammered
same
them.
stuff.
He caught 15 keepers
Yeah.
on a football
Yeah.
head jig, and he was stroking it.
Well,
and
and-
I was gonna ask you about that too, about, like, right now I'm seeing fish on the bottom, or suspended just off the bottom. And today when I went out, I stroked the jig in 20 to 22 feet of water, and that's when I got bit.
You can. And
Technique
that's-
is, I think, a pretty, I don't know, that's what I saw from Roger, and so I went and tried it.
Yeah. And that's always been a thing. Nobody really talks about it a lot because
Right.
nobody wants everybody knowing about it. But, you know, stroking a big jig always has been a thing.
Yeah.
And especially when they're not very aggressive.
Yeah.
You know, when you're fishing for a fish that doesn't really want to bite, there's a lot of times you'll get a reaction
It's a
bite out of
reaction bite.
stroking a jig.
Guaranteed, the bites I had today were reaction
Yeah.
bites. Yeah.
And you can do the same thing.
Here, we'll pass it around this way.
You can do the same thing with a flutter spoon, you know, and I
Yeah,
know that's
right. No,
something
exactly.
that we don't like to talk about it because we catch a lot of fish on it, but
Yeah.
a flutter spoon does the same thing.
Yeah,
We do it with football jig because you land most of them that bite
Right.
you on a football jig over
Yeah.
a spoon, and you don't kill near as many of them when
Yeah.
you throw a football jig.
yeah, yeah,
I didn't even
get
bring a
that-
spoon,
get
that's
that-
how much I dislike
they
throwing.
get that spoon, stuck it down in
Yeah.
there, and it's like, oh boy.
Yeah.
You got blood.
I do throw
blood
one.
all over your boat.
When I have to.
And it
but
catches catfish, and it catches
does.
anything that swims.
It is.
I hate that catfish line. My first cast today, I throw towards a brush pile, and oh God, this is a good one. This is a good one. Yeah, this ain't a bass.
Rolls twice down there. You
It
know
was
what it
a
is.
catfish on a jig.
In the same note of a
jig, are you strictly jig, or do you kind of switch it up between a chatterbait and a jig, or are you just more on stick, plain Jane jig?
You're asking a Hibdon that question?
I gotta ask.
Well, we do throw a chatterbait a lot, not this time of year a lot, but a chatterbait, if I'm fishing around a lot of grass, you know, which we don't have, but if you're fishing around a lot of grass, we throw a chatterbait a lot more just because it's more efficient, you know. A chatterbait around a lot of the cover that we have in Lake the Ozarks is just not efficient, you know, because you're either really deep or, you know, we do throw it around shallow docks a little bit. When they're suspended around shallow docks under the foam and stuff, we will skip a chatterbait around some, and you do catch some fish on it. To say I catch as many on it as I do a regular jig, probably not. But if we had some grass in the lake, I would definitely throw it a lot more, just because it does work around grass better. You know, you're not hung up in it all the time. You're not letting it fall all the way down in there. But yeah, that's a good question, because
Yeah.
we throw chatterbait quite a bit.
Good question.
And it's
And
also,
there are fish on dock corners right now too, and it's, a
yeah,
lot of times you go through a lot of small ones, but every now and then you
Yeah.
will catch a big one. Something
Yeah.
like a chatterbait or a wacky Cinco or something like that,
Yeah.
it's gonna get you a lot of bites.
yeah. Yep, you go through a lot of numbers, you know,
Right.
fishing around corners and stuff. You catch a lot of spotted bass. Every now and then you catch one of them unicorns, you know,
Right.
4-pound spotted bass. Not very often,
Right.
but, no, I mean, a jig's just, you know, probably our staple, you know, when it comes to Lake the Ozarks. If I can go out there and throw a jig, I'm pretty comfortable that I'm gonna, you know, catch some on it.
Well, when Baitworks actually releases that jig, let me know.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll be sure to promote it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Something that, when these fish start getting in brush piles a lot more, for whatever reason, they like a big straight tail worm. They like a big ribbon tail worm. To say I can tell you what that is or what it imitates, I can't, because there's nothing down there on the bottom that
It looks like that.
I mean, a jig makes
It's kind of like
a little more
it's
sense.
kind of like a
'cause-
Cinco. It's like,
Right.
what the hell do fish think that Cinco
I mean,
is? They sure do eat it.
This is just something that they bite, you know, and I can't explain it, but they do. You know, and we throw it on a shaky head 90% of the time, just because I like the way it hooks them. You know, you hook a lot more of them in the top of the mouth versus Texas rigging it. You kind of hook them all over the mouth.
What size head?
That just varies from, you know,
Duck.
how deep we're gonna be fishing. If I'm fishing a pile of brush that's 10 or 12 foot, I'm probably gonna throw like a 3/8 size shaky head. If you're fishing 18 to 20, you know, you can still throw a 3/8 out there, but you could throw a half or a 3/4,
Something that's gonna
5/8,
get down there a little
whatever.
quicker.
Yeah, anything that gets down there and you can feel it on the bottom, that's the biggest key with fishing around brush, is just being able to feel everything really good. Knowing when you're coming over that limb and you can let it fall back down. You know, that's the biggest key to brush pile fishing. There's not any science behind it besides just being able to feel what you're doing down there and knowing when you get bit.
And do you have a favorite color, or is that kind of depends
Well-
on water clarity, or what kind of worm is this?
I don't know the exact brand on that one. I'm not too sure. It's not a Sixth Sense.
I was just gonna say,
But-
if you don't know, then I'm gonna say it's a 6 ounce.
I think it
it
is.
is a 6 ounce,
Pretty sure.
actually, you know?
You gonna do a shaky head like that jig?
Yes, we are. We've already been working on one that looks very similar. It's a little different, but it's going to be very similar.
Yeah.
Your dad keeps saying, you know, sometimes when they're not fighting, to, you know, downsize, because they'd rather have a potato chip than a full steak sometimes. Is this time of the year the same, you know, situation?
Yeah, it is. A lot of times, you know, our downsizing will be to that, though, you know, to like a worm.
The worm.
Because you know, you go from throwing something like that in there, That's a big profile. When that hits the bottom, you know, it's not all streamlined like that. When that hits the bottom, it's all flared out, and that's a big profile down there. Where you throw that worm in there, that's a lot smaller profile, you know, that's working around down in there. I don't know if that's a night crawler down there to them or what that is, but it doesn't make a lot of sense, but I know they do get on a worm late summer. They've been on it all summer, but late summer especially, they get on it, and you better be throwing a worm.
And do you prefer, like, you know, you just mentioned, and again, you're a pro, so we're very interested in your insights on this. Do you prefer a shaky head around some of that brush or rocky points or something like that versus a ribbon tail that's Texas rigged or something like that?
I throw a shaky head a lot just because you can feel it a lot better, you know, and tungsten weights have cured a lot of that, but you throw a shaky head out there and it's just like throwing a jig out there, you know when
Right.
you're in
You're
contact
feeling
with
it.
the bottom.
Right. Yeah.
I tend to throw one with a small flat spot on it, you know, so it kind of stands up, and you know, you just feel it a lot better. A Texas rig's very streamlined, and it's great around brush because it works in and out of stuff easy.
Yeah.
But I've always kind of had a theory around brush, just like I do, you know, when I'm throwing out on a point or something. When I'm throwing something in there on a head like that, that's got a little bit of bulk to it on the head, you're still kicking up silt and stuff.
Right.
So,
That's
you know,
great,
I
great.
throw a shaky head a lot over a Texas rig if I can. You know, even around docks where you don't really need to throw a shaky head, we still throw them a lot.
Yeah.
Just because you hook them really good a lot of times.
How about a Carolina rig or a
That's great insight.
floating worm? Is that, have you used that technique at all?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, a Carolina rig, you know, it's kind of one of them deals where about 8 months out of the year, some old boy can win on a Carolina rig, just dragging it around out there. It happens to us all the time. A lot of guys don't talk about it anymore, but still, you walk around in the morning, you know, you see them laying on the front decks of boats and stuff. Somebody will have a Carolina rig laid out there. That's no other reason. That's a fish catcher.
It's just like you said, what it sounds like is it's creating a lot of disruption on the bottom.
It does, and something that a lot of people don't know about a Carolina rig, and my grandpa was crazy about it. Him and Peter T, you know, they roomed together forever, but
Yeah.
Peter T is phenomenal at it. And, you know, something that Pete taught me a long time ago, they don't throw little tiny weights and stuff on a Carolina rig because that defeats the purpose of it. You know, when you're throwing a Carolina rig out there, it's to tell what you're fishing around on the bottom, or you're wanting to kick up a lot of silt and stuff.
Right.
So I mean,
So half ounce weight type thing?
normally it's a 3/4 and 1 ounce,
No
even
kidding.
an ounce and a half.
I'll
you
be
know.
darned.
They throw big stuff.
There's some good insight.
Yeah.
There's some wisdom from a pro.
And it's not for me because I don't throw one very much.
Right.
But I know the guys that were really good at it,
Right.
and you just don't throw little ones or nothing.
Yeah.
You just throw big sinkers. They throw little baits on them a lot of times.
Yeah.
You know, they'll throw like a baby brush hog or something, but a lot of times it's behind an ounce and a half sinker. So
Right.
that's just kicking up a lot of debris and stuff on the bottom. Yes, gets you a lot of bites. One of them things, it's kind of been forgotten by a lot of guys, but it will still catch a big stringer fish pretty well all year, anywhere you want to throw it.
Yeah.
I mean, from Florida up north, that's the only time I throw it a lot is when we go up north smallmouth fishing.
Right.
Because them smallmouth are crazy about it. But yeah, that's a good one. I mean, floating worm,
And this,
And then floating-
did we pass that worm around to everybody?
floating
Yeah.
worm.
Is there a specific color?
That's about a 2-week
Maybe
out of
like
the
a-
year deal for me, and that's around the spawn. Normally post spawn, you know, I'll have a few good days on a floating worm. My dad's always been really good at it, and it just takes a lot of patience, it seems like, because you got to throw it out there and a lot of times let it sit there. But yeah, floating worm's pretty cool. If they ever get on that bite, you get to be in on it once really good, you'll want to throw it a lot more.
Right.
But
Skips really well.
it does. It does. And it's fun when you go to some of them lakes where dominates in the springtime, you know, like a lot of the East Coast lakes, Lake Murray and Hartwell and some of those. That's where the floating worm kind of originated, and it just filtered this away. But you go to Lake Murray, from March till May, you've got a few floating worms laid out on your deck. But
I think they even catch them in the fall.
I think they do.
Wolfpack fish.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't throw it a lot here, you know, just around the spawn.
Yeah.
They do eat it around the spawn.
Any specific color on the shaky head worms that you like any better? Do you like dark colors?
Yeah, in the summertime for us, you know, we'll have a green pumpkin one, but typically it's a blue fleck, you know, and that's for your darker days or if you're fishing deep. You know, if you're out there in that 20-foot range, we throw blue fleck a lot just because it's a good dark purple. You know, to say the flake in it actually makes any difference, I think just because it's a dark color,
Right.
you know.
Because it's dark down there.
Yeah, it's
At
very dark
20
down
feet
there.
is dark.
Nobody really realizes how dark it is down there, but it's really dark. And then we throw red bug a ton.
Right, yeah.
Red bug is probably my favorite big worm color. You know, we've always thrown it. It's just been a great color.
Cool.
Green pumpkin, if you don't know what to throw green pumpkin.
Green pumpkin, right,
Because
right.
green pumpkin will catch them anywhere, anytime.
Right, cool.
Doesn't really matter. I did bring some other stuff, still some shad-oriented stuff. You know, and that, people kind of get away from it. You know, when the fish get around brush, you know, they start throwing stuff on the bottom. Well, you can still, you know, you can take that same swim bait you were catching them on in June, and you can throw it out there around that brush pile, work it around. A lot of times, a big aggressive one will come out of there and eat it. You know, that's why we still have them laid out on our deck.
Yeah, mostly working it over the top of the brush, or you are you looking at your bait with your forward-facing sonar? or-
Well, that's changed it quite a bit. You know, we run Lowrance, which is the active target,
Right.
and you know, you can throw this thing out there and literally make it touch the top of that brush, where it used to be you kind of threw it out there and you felt the pile of brush and you had
And
to
then you
work
kind
it
of work it
over
over the top of it?
Now you can, I mean, just kick the top of that pile and make him come out of there and eat it. But, you know, that's kind of a specific deal. Doesn't happen every day, but the days it does happen, normally you're at the top of the heap when it comes to getting paid.
Yeah.
You know, but that's just one of them.
Let's take a look at that.
We do the same thing with that hair jig.
Is that the 5-inch Zoom?
Yeah.
Isn't Zoom like not making these anymore?
Well, actually, I've heard other stories about that. That's the only bait that Zoom has imported. Everything else is made in the United States, and that's made in Japan.
Got it.
And that's just been hard to get.
And what kind of head is that has this brush guard on it?
Yeah, well, I was gonna ask that. Where'd you get those heads?
Well, we make them. That's just so when you touch
Really?
a pile of brush, you know, you don't get.
I mean, that's really awesome. I don't think I don't know that I know of any swim heads, swim bait heads that actually have.
Sell too?
Not yet. Not yet.
That's
a
pretty
dirt
cool.
deal.
That's pretty cool. That's very cool.
Yeah, and it actually, it's hard to explain, but you throw a swim bait out there without those weed guards on it, and you lose quite a few of them when they come up and jump.
Yeah.
It's no different than if you threw that jig out there without a fiber guard in it.
Right.
When he comes up and jumps around, that's a lot of, you know, that's a lot of weight that
Right.
he can just toss around. Where if you put those weed guards in there, it seems to pin a little better, and they can't just throw it around. You know, it pins into their mouth.
Is there?
So we throw it
Is there?
all the time, even if we're not throwing it around cover. You know, we still throw
Is
it.
there a commercially available, before you guys design one, available that's got weed guards on it like
Not
that?
that I know of.
That's freaking awesome.
It is, and it's, I mean, Dirk and I will run with that one.
Yeah.
Because that's a cool head.
Yeah.
But, yeah, he is working on one to sell, but nobody that I know of is putting those wire weed
That's
guards in
freaking
yet.
awesome, and they're stiff too.
Yeah.
I can tell, man,
Yeah.
they're stiff.
It's
That's a good deal.
really what, what I'm trying to tell you is it's not near as much for not getting hung up as it is for losing fish.
Right, okay.
'Cause you just don't seem to lose them near as much when you got those weed guards in there.
Man, that makes a lot of sense, man. That's good stuff, Lawson. What you got in your hands, man?
Well, that's-
Let's get some more of that
That's
super
some
secret shit.
old-fashioned stuff there. That's nothing else. I mean, it's just a big bucktail hair jig, you know, with some chicken feathers in it. But, you know, and there are 100 different ones on the market. To say that matters, it doesn't. I mean, as long as it's, you know, big, shady looking, same deal as a swim bait. You don't seem to get near as many bites on this, but I actually fished with this guy over here a few weeks ago, and he got to witness it. But a lot of times, for whatever reason, this will get you an absolute giant bite.
How are you working it and what kind of structure?
It's just a lot like that swim bait. You know, you throw it out there. If you can see the fish and you know about what depth they are, you can just kind of wind it through them. If you can't see them, throw it out there, let it hit bottom, kind of crank it in real slow, you know. No science behind it.
No trailer at all? Just
No,
let
it's
the
just
let the
that.
hair do its job?
Yep.
Let the hair do the
Just
movement?
that. That does a lot of moving in the water.
And what size is that head?
That's a 5/8. But like I say, if you go out there and throw that all day, there's a lot of days where you won't get 5 bites on it. Either.
No, I get it.
You know,
Yeah,
you-
it's just
you
on,
might get
it's on the deck.
3 or 4 bites, but they might all be 5-pounders. You know, I can't explain it. They
That'll
just-
work.
Big ones eat it.
have a day like that.
Big ones tend to eat it for whatever reason.
Here, go ahead, John, if you want to pass it around.
I think
They were, okay, I'm sorry. What else you got up there?
I brought a deep diving crankbait. I mean, it's like I say, that's kind of a hit or miss. You know, when you get to the heat of the summer like this, there are days where you can really catch them on it. But when they're really locked into that brush and stuff, that's not when you catch them on it. You catch them on it when they're more just kind of standing around.
Right.
You know, right now, like what you guys were talking about, seeing those fish suspended,
Right.
you'll have a day, and it doesn't happen every day. Trust me, I've thrown it all day out there and not caught them on it. But you will have a day once in a while that you just bust them on a big crankbait when they're not really eating anything else.
Right.
And we still, I mean, we tend to throw wild colors in it just because that's something to get their attention.
I threw one exactly like that today, a 20-foot, cloud 25, or cloud 20.
Yeah.
Not the 25,
Yeah.
but the cloud 20. Didn't get any bites,
Yeah.
but that's exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking, man, these fish are out there just,
It happens. and
Just-
when it happens, you want to be in on
they're
it.
just off the bottom.
Yeah.
It wasn't happening today, but it's always worth having on deck.
Yeah. It happens every now and then.
Rick Fishback seems to swear by the crappie color one. Have you tried a crappie color?
I have. I've thrown those crank wrapped ones. To say I can tell you it makes a difference, no, it's got treble hooks on it. I don't like to throw it.
It's a reaction.
Yeah.
It's a reaction strike.
Guys like Fishback and Blankenship, they throw religiously and good for them.
Yeah,
I'm good at it. I am not. I catch them on a jig and other stuff. You know, if it's got a single hook in it, I feel like I can land him on it 90% of the time with
I mean,
that.
when you're crankbait fishing, will you try a crankbait color one or just?
Oh yeah,
wild colors?
yeah. I mean, I've got boxes and boxes of different colors of deep diving ones. I try it all, you know, just to try and compete with it when it's happening.
I just wondered, there's a certain time of year when the crappie color crankbait works better than other colors.
Well, Dirk will probably kill me for saying it, but in the fall, it's pretty well always a crappie color for us.
Okay.
You know, October, November, there is a time period where Dirk is going to dominate, and it's mostly on a crankbait. And I've watched it happen 100 days, you know, following right behind him. And I can never go out there and make it happen every day. He can do it day after day, and I just can't. I can have one good day out of a week. There's guys
Dirk
that...
back out here to talk about that then.
We're trying.
He'll tell you about it.
We're
He's
trying.
taught a lot of people about it.
We're trying. Yeah, we're trying.
There's just people that are really good with that. I've fished with really good guys. I mean, I've fished with Fritz like 3 different times, and he's he's phenomenal with it. But
And it looks like he doesn't do anything special. I've
He
been
doesn't.
out with him and he just kind of,
he's The whole thing with those guys, a lot of their crankbait fishing is more of boat positioning than,
Yeah, I think
you know,
so, yeah.
because he makes the same distance cast every time.
Right, yeah.
He never varies the distance
Yeah,
of cast.
yeah.
And that's what always kind of intrigued me a little bit, is how good he must be to know exactly where it's gonna hit the bottom right there. And his next cast, he's gonna move his boat 10 foot closer to it, so it hits the bottom just on the other side of it. You know.
History's a good teacher.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of the best, like you.
Well, I've got to
you know,
fish
hit-
with some of the best guys.
Yeah, well, and you learn from them, and
Yeah.
we appreciate your sharing, your wisdom with us. And you just gotta go out there and kind of figure it out, but yeah, that history can make a difference in terms of that depth, this
Oh, yeah.
particular spot, there's a deep spot or something like that, right? A little bitty deep spot somewhere that might just be holding fish.
Nothing, I've said it 100 times, my dad, nothing replaces time on the water.
Right.
You know, there's a huge learning curve to bass fishing. You don't just go to Bass Pro
Especially on
Shop
a
or
big
Fitz
lake.
Fishing and load up on tackle
Right.
and go out there and catch them.
55,000 acre lake with 90 miles of shoreline,
You gotta go out there.
25,000 boat docks, and probably at least 10 or 15 times that number of brush piles.
Oh, yeah. You have got to put your time in, get out there.
Yeah.
If nothing else, you gotta just learn your fundamentals.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the biggest thing, when you get that bite, that's the most important thing, is when you get that bite, learning how to land him.
Right.
Because, you go to a place like the Ozarks, and you're gonna get some bites.
Yeah.
But I fished with a lot of people, and I haven't been fishing that long, but I fished with a lot of people that I've seen that just, they kind of skip steps.
Right.
They got out there and figured out how to use their electronics, but they never figured out some of those first easy steps,
Right.
how to actually catch him.
Right.
And that's the most important things to learn.
And I think what I've heard from people, and I'll ask you, Lawson, I've heard from a lot of pros, is pay attention to what that bite was.
Absolutely.
And if that bite was 15 foot in a brush pile on a main lake, blah, 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 or whatever, see if you can replicate it.
Yep. And that's one awesome thing about the lakes, all these Ozark
Yeah.
lakes is they're so good at, you can just take off when you figure something out. You've got a pattern you can run because there's so much of it that looks the same. I mean, Lake the Ozarks.
Exactly. Everything,
If you get on a dock pattern
everything
on Lake
looks
the
good.
Ozarks, I mean, if you tell me that you're catching them off boat docks on Lake the Ozarks, you're going to hear me laugh, because there's 100 different types of boat docks to catch
Right,
them on.
yeah, exactly.
If you can actually pinpoint that and figure out exactly how he is, that's the biggest thing. If you can figure out what kind of bank that is behind it, what's on the bottom, that's how you learn how to put patterns together, is really paying attention to everything.
Yeah. Lawson,
I've heard Jack Upson talk about the different types of boat docks and which docks to fish, whether it's a concrete one or an old wooden one, or
time
whatever.
of year, patterns.
Yeah, do you have any insight to that?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of different kinds. Most of it for us is more so where it's placed. A lot of guys talk about old boat docks, because old boat docks a lot of times have got brush and stuff around them that the crappie fishermen throw in. But most of it for what we do, me and Dad, my brother, we look at where it's at, what kind of bank it is, and there'll be a lot of times it'll be like a channel swing thing. You'll hear guys talk about channel swings. Well, there'll be a channel that just dips in there close to that dock. That's a lot of times a pattern that we run. That's a good fall. When they get deeper in the fall, that's a good pattern. Channel swings. To say, the materials that the dock's built out of, that's kind of irrelevant for
It used
us.
to be the old styrofoam.
It used to make a difference. I mean,
Yeah.
styrofoam and, that black foam, it's all changed. But to say now it makes a lot of difference, it really doesn't. I mean, if you went to talking about it having like poles on it, there's a dock with poles to brace it, that's something that we've got a few of here. But, most of it's just where it's at. what time of the year it is for, you know, trying to pattern where they're at, you know, more than anything.
What they're doing now is you can't put any more, you know, things in except riprap. You know?
Right.
So is that anything to key on, or is that something that you guys key on? Because I've seen or fished and caught some more fish around riprap than I have just a regular, you know, seawall
yeah.
and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's one thing we do pay attention to a lot is what kind of seawall it is behind the dock. If you come to a seawall that's built out of rock versus a concrete seawall, a lot of them rock ones, they use the rock that they come across right there. So a lot of them won't have a footing on them, or the footing will kind of be insignificant. If you come to one that's concrete, they dig out a footing on that concrete, you know, and they pour, you know, a base to it, and those fish use that a lot. Where if you come to it and it's built out of rocks, that's kind of just a straight path around there. But if he's got something to stand around down there, you know, the rocks that they pushed out of the way and all the sand and stuff, that gives them something to stand around. And riprap, of course, that's riprap. They live around it everywhere. Every lake I've ever come to, there's fish living on riprap. And that's nothing more than that's a good feeding place for them, because the crawdads live there, the bluegill live there, everything lives around riprap.
Lawson, we're over an hour in, and so I just want to open it up for any further questions for Lawson.
I just had one comment about, you brought up a good point about forward or sonar, forward facing sonar. Everybody now it's like, oh, you got forward facing sonar, you got an advantage. You brought up that you can see those fish, but you still got to make them bite.
That's right.
Yeah. And I am, since I've started using it, you know, I am a huge believer in it. It does play a huge part anymore of going out and winning a lot of the tournaments. But about half the year, I can leave it turned off and just go fishing and be just as happy.
Got it.
Because, I mean, I don't want to see them a lot of the times. Cause,
I know when I fish shallow, I don't even turn it on.
no. Yeah, I mean, if I'm fishing a boat dock, I normally leave it turned off. If I'm looking for a brush pile out here away from it, you know, that's when I use it a lot, is finding small pieces of cover, finding individual fish standing on like a little rock or something. You know, that's where guys are beating us now. You know, they're looking for stuff that's off the wall.
Right.
But to say it plays a huge part, it definitely does. I mean, we use it daily. Yeah. My dad's using it daily, and that's pretty hard. That's pretty hard to believe.
Yeah.
But he's watched me do it, you know, catching crappie and stuff. He's like, wow, that's really cool.
Well, it definitely makes a different crappie fishing.
Oh yeah, it's a cool piece of equipment, and
Yeah.
you know, if you've got one, great. If you don't have one, you don't have to have it to go win. Trust me, because we still, you know, win once in a while, and normally when we do, it's not because of that sonar. You know, it plays a huge role for us, but typically when it comes down to going and catching him, that's not the deal. I mean, you still got to go figure out what he wants to eat. You know, you got to figure out what depth he is. You know, all that's where that sonar comes into play. But when it comes down to catching him, getting him in the live well, taking him to the weigh-in, you just got to do that most of you know, on your own. You know.
Now, you're a Lowrance guy, Bob's a Garmin guy.
On my
Just
forward facing sonar.
Right.
On Humminbird, everything.
Humminbird. And I just saw that Humminbird came out with not only a, you know, forward-facing sonar, but a whole stick besides your.
They got a thing where they call it, it's not spot lock, it's called target lock.
Yeah.
So you can, you know, point your
Forward-facing sonar different than your trolling motor.
And and it'll lock in on that even if you drift away or there's waves and stuff like that. So that's pretty cool. But you know, that's the nature of this industry. I mean,
It's just
they're gonna keep
better and better.
leapfrogging each other with a little bit of interesting technology. You know, just stick with it. Work with what you're comfortable with. That's just my opinion. And know that whatever you can't chase the latest thing. They all have forward-facing sonar.
Everybody's got to have their own thing.
Yeah, right,
You know,
yeah.
And for us, you know, looking at forward-facing sonar, it is fun. It's a huge deal. You know, if you're going to tournaments, you know, unfamiliar lakes, yeah, I definitely recommend you have it because it teaches you a lot. But, you know, if you don't like using electronics, I mean, you're not going to talk somebody into that, you know,
Right.
using it when they don't even want to.
Right.
You know, I want to learn stuff. I want to be able to compete, you know.
Yeah.
And you got to keep up with it to compete.
Absolutely.
To
Any
say-
other questions for Lawson? And Lawson, I want to ask you, so you and your dad this year are fishing, I think I have one final question for you, so everybody stay tuned. And it's a good one. But you guys are fishing the Bass Opens this year, is that
Yep.
correct? And when's your first Bass Open and where is it?
We only got in the Central Division this year. We kind of got in on it late, so we had one at Ross Barnett. Both of us kind of stunk it up down there.
Yeah.
I don't even know exactly where I finished, middle of the pack somewhere.
Yeah,
But
that's pretty good against all those pros.
the next one is on the Red River in September.
Cool,
And that's actually where Dad won the Forestwood Cup, and it was in September, so
nice.
he's excited for that one.
I'll bet he is.
Hopefully Stephen Browning didn't fish in it.
Hopefully not. He might be.
Because he's won the last two.
Yeah.
Red River ones.
Yeah. And then we've got one on Rayburn sometime in October, I think.
So all you Hibdon followers out there, you can follow the Hibdons on the Bass Open tour.
Yep.
So we appreciate that. And before I ask my final zinger of a question for you, tell us a little bit about some of your sponsors and how those sponsors help you not only win tournaments, compete well in tournaments, but just how they help you out overall.
Oh, absolutely. You can't do it without sponsors. I mean, it's way too expensive. There are a few guys out there doing it, and I have no idea how. But you have to have good sponsors, you know, good people behind you. When you go out there, you got to be able to feel comfortable, you know, that your equipment's not going to break. You know, if it does, that it's going to get taken care of immediately. You know, that's the whole thing. I mean, you're away from home, you know, and you can't just pull over here to this marina and get your stuff fixed right now. So you got to have stuff that you know is going to work all the time. We're running Camus boats now. Can't say enough about them.
Me too.
They are phenomenal. Everything you hear about them, they're pretty incredible boats. You know, we're running Mercury motors and power poles and all the riggings. Lowrance, you know, we signed on with Lowrance this year. They've been great to us. Everything they've got's wonderful. Boatworks, I can't say enough about them. Those guys have really changed it for us, you know, anymore, because I had a guy run over my trailer the other day at the launch ramp, and you know, they got me in, got it fixed, and I'm back on the road. So
One of the things I love about Boatworks is everybody that works there, from the service department to, you know, the sales to the parts,
they're all fishermen.
they're all fishermen.
They know.
They totally get it.
You know, Dan Bowman,
Best.
I can't say enough about him, but you know, everybody at Boatworks, you know, they're fishermen. They understand how it all works, and they're great people. You know, that's one that we couldn't do it without them.
Right.
You know, if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be traveling.
Right.
You know, of course, Bass and Bob, he's a sponsor of ours. Phenomenal. Puts these things on, you know, gets the word out about everything. He's got all kinds of good pros to come and talk.
Appreciate that. Yeah.
Just a great thing that Bass and Bob has done for Lake the Ozarks and
Appreciate that.
everywhere for
How
that
about
matter.
any bait and tackle companies?
Yeah, we're still working with Lew's and Strike King. You know, they've still got a lot of stuff that, you know, everybody's using, rods, reels. We're still using all that stuff. We're actually working with Baitworks now. Baitworks is a tackle store, goes along with Boatworks. They're making a big push in the tackle industry, and I'm just glad we're going to get to be a part of it, because it's going to be a big deal in the end. So, That's gonna be big. You know, Tin Cup Whiskey's still one of our main sponsors. Can't say enough about them. Luke Foley at Tin Cup.
Awesome.
Still awesome family friend, and always will be. But,
Cool.
yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it.
So my last zinger question.
I'm excited.
So,
I've been anticipating this. What do you got?
so in the summertime, this time of the year, and maybe moving into August, what's going to be your favorite part of the lake to fish,
Ooh.
and why?
I-
I know you know this lake from dam to dam.
And to say I have a favorite spot, you know, or a favorite stretch of lake, I don't. Not this time of year. If I had to pick one, it would be probably from, I would even have to go as low as the toll bridge, but from the toll bridge to, you know, the Green Bridge, Hurricane Deck, that
Right.
area,
Yeah.
Four Corners.
Yeah.
I really like that area this time of year, and I think it gets avoided a lot. That's why we tend to move that direction.
Got it.
I'm excited that you're having a summer sizzler up there.
Red Oak.
I'm not gonna have to kill myself to run up there. No, that's a, you know, probably my favorite stretch for late summer, early fall. Always has been.
I know, I said one zinger question, but I'll ask you another. So, you know, we have a 90-mile lake here, and you defined a very good stretch from there and even probably all over.
That's a big stretch.
To the
but-
dam, and to the gravel, but I know you're also, you love the river area. If you were gonna fish the river area, let's call it from Hurricane Deck Bridge to Warsaw, what would you be looking for? What kind of baits would you be throwing?
Things do change up there a little bit because those fish are a lot shallower. You know, there's not 20 foot of water to fish up there. So, and I do fish up there. I actually fished up there all night last night till about 4 in the morning.
No kidding.
But we were walleye fishing. So,
You catch them?
we did. We caught a bunch of them. But no, up there, you know, I tend to just pick up you know, a skipping style jig a lot. We start catching a lot of fish on square bill crankbait, you know, late in the summer. They get shallow and start eating them bluegill, and even up there they eat a lot more shad. But big worm still catches them up there, but you typically want a Texas rig it on about a 5/16 quarter or 5/16 ounce sinker. You're pitching it around that 5 foot range a lot more, you know, than 5 to 8 foot docks.
Right.
Thing about up the river, it's pretty featureless, you know.
Yeah.
And when I say featureless, you're not fishing a lot of them points and stuff like you are down on the low end. Up there, you know, their feeding areas, they're a little more vast because everything's flat.
Yeah.
You do have channel banks and stuff, but to say that this time of year, it doesn't really matter. I don't think they use those channel banks as much. I think they focus more on shade and where the bluegill, you know, stuff like that are at. So I'm typically skipping a jig under shallow boat docks
Cool.
up there.
Awesome. Awesome,
We
Lawson.
make it pretty simple up the river when we go.
Appreciate it, buddy. Any final questions for Lawson? Lawson, thank you so much, man. That was awesome. Absolutely awesome. We appreciate you so much.